Wait, before I start, I need to ask you something.
What if I told you that your country, a country you probably respect, a country that's supposed to be civilized and democratic, committed genocide?
And then hid it for 70 years?
And when I say genocide, I mean actual genocide. Torture camps, mass executions, rape, disappearances, the whole thing.
Would you believe me? Would you even care? Because that's exactly what happened, and almost nobody knows about it.
This is the story of how the British Empire didn't just fall, it collapsed while committing horrific crimes and then spent decades covering them up.
So stick with me, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change how you see history, how you see power, how you see what happens when governments think they can do whatever they want. Okay, 1945. World War II just ended, and I want you to understand something. Britain's exhausted. I mean, completely destroyed.
They've been fighting for 6 years straight. They've spent every single penny they had.
They've borrowed money from America. They've sold off their treasure.
Like actually bankrupt. There are food shortages in Britain. British people are rationing. There's no money, there's nothing left.
But here's the thing nobody tells you. At the exact same moment that Britain is broke, the empire is about to explode.
Because millions of people in India, in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Southeast Asia, they're all watching what just happened in World War II.
And they're thinking, if Britain can almost lose to Germany, if the great British Empire can be pushed to the brink by one guy with a mustache, then maybe, just maybe, we can beat them.
And that's when everything starts falling apart.
In 1947, India declares independence. One of the most powerful moments in history, right? Millions of people celebrating, finally free. Their country is theirs again.
But here's what makes me angry. Britain doesn't just leave. They partition the country. They split India into India and Pakistan. And they do it carelessly.
Like the borders don't make sense. Ethnic groups that lived together for centuries suddenly end up on opposite sides of the border. Imagine this. Imagine you wake up one morning, and overnight, a border has moved. Your neighbors are now your enemies. Your best friend is now in a different country. You have to choose. Do you stay or do you flee?
Millions of people face that choice. And you know what happened? Hundreds of thousands died. Entire families slaughtered. Communities destroyed.
People burned alive. Women raped. Children murdered. Just gone.
And Britain's just like, well, this is tragic. Anyway, we're leaving now.
In Kenya, there's a white settler population. Wealthy British people who'd moved there and basically stolen all the land from Kenyans.
They had huge farms, beautiful mansions, all built on stolen land, all built on slavery. So when Kenya starts demanding independence, these white settlers are like, absolutely not. This is our home. We're staying. And the Kenyan independence movement is like, no, get out. This is our country.
And it gets violent.
There's a group called Mau Mau, fighting for independence. They start attacking white settlers. They're desperate. They're fighting for their land, their survival. And Britain's response is, I need you to understand this, absolutely insane. They declare a state of emergency, martial law, and they start rounding up Kenyans.
They establish detention camps, thousands of them, and they start torturing people. And I'm not talking about rough interrogation. I'm talking about actual torture, burns, mutilation, sexual violence, beating so severe people die.
One British officer describes it like this. He says, we could do whatever we wanted. Nobody was stopping us. Nobody was watching. We had all the power.
Think about that. A British soldier admitting he'd tortured people because he could.
because nobody checked, because the system allowed it. Think about that. A British soldier admitting he'd tortured people because he could, because nobody checked, because the system allowed it.
And this is being done by the British military, officially, with official resources, following orders.
The British government knew. The reports came back. The documentation existed, but they didn't stop it. And then, here's the part that breaks my heart. They hid it. For 70 years. Documents destroyed, records classified, archives sealed, survivors silenced. It wasn't until 2013 that Britain finally admitted what happened, and only because survivors sued. Some of these survivors are alive right now, still traumatized, and for 7 decades, nobody in Britain cared. Most didn't even know. After Kenya, you need to understand something. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a system, a method, and Malaya was the blueprint. In Malaya, Britain wanted one thing: rubber and tin. 2 resources the empire needed desperately. So when Malayan workers started organizing and demanding rights, Britain didn't negotiate. They panicked. They feared communism. They feared revolution. They feared losing their resources. So in 1948, they launched something called the Briggs Plan. And this changed everything. They forcibly removed hundreds of thousands of people from their homes, burned entire villages, ordered mass relocations.
These weren't small relocations. They created what the British literally called new villages.
The idea was simple. Isolate the population. Cut them off from rebels. Control their food. Control their movement. Control their lives. People had to carry ID cards just to move around. Curfews, searches, surveillance, total control.
And if anyone resisted, they were arrested, tortured, or killed. Britain executed over 500 people in Malaya, many without fair trials.
This wasn't just a war. It was social engineering, psychological warfare, population control on a massive scale. But here's the part that almost nobody knows. The techniques Britain perfected in Malaya, forced relocations, detention camps, propaganda, torture, they carried those methods to Kenya, and Cyprus, and Yemen, and Ireland, and Palestine.
This wasn't random. This was the Empire's playbook.
And you're about to see something horrific. How these techniques evolved into full-scale mass punishment and genocide-level brutality.
In the 1950s, Britain moves its attention to Cyprus, and here the fight isn't about land. It's about nationalism, independence, identity.
Cypriots were demanding one thing: enosis, unity with Greece, freedom from British rule. And Britain treats this movement like an insurgency, like terrorism. They bring in counterinsurgency experts from Kenya and Malaya. Same people, same tactics, same playbook.
What follows is one of the most quietly cruel chapters of British imperial history. Britain builds a network of prisons and interrogation centers, some official, some completely off-record.
Inside these walls, they use sleep deprivation, noise torture, extreme isolation, psychological breakdown techniques. Interrogators would bang on doors all night, blast sounds, keep lights on 24 hours, create disorientation so complete that prisoners lost their sense of time, identity, even reality. No beatings, no knives, no blood. Just silence and noise used as weapons. Britain also used hunger tactics, cutting food rations to force cooperation, making prisoners dependent, weak, desperate. Some prisoners were kept so long in isolation that when released, they couldn't speak properly. They forgot how. 9 Cypriot fighters were executed by hanging,
Britain refused every appeal. Some families weren't allowed to bury their own sons.
This created a wave of fury across Cyprus. It didn't break the movement, it made it stronger.
And just like in Kenya, reports started leaking. Survivors started talking. Something was wrong inside those walls.
But the British government denied everything. No torture, they said, no illegal prisons.
Years later, long after the empire's collapse, declassified files revealed the truth. Yes, Britain tortured people in Cyprus. Yes, they used psychological warfare. Yes, they hid it.
By the 1960s, the British Empire is falling apart, colony after colony breaking free, and then they lose Yemen completely, violently, publicly.
Aden wasn't just a colony, it was the empire's fuel stop, a gateway to the Middle East, the last major outpost before total collapse.
When independence movements rise, Britain reacts the same way it did in Kenya, in Cyprus, in Malaya, by sending in the military.
But this time, it's different. The resistance is organized, they're urban, and they know the terrain better than anyone.
Aden becomes a battlefield. Bombings, sniper attacks, street ambushes. Britain is losing control, fast.
So Britain escalates hard. They launch mass roundups, curfews, house raids.
Civilians get caught in the middle, every day, every hour.
Britain used airstrikes on villages in North Yemen. Entire regions bombed as punishment.
The goal wasn't military victory, it was pressure, intimidation, collective punishment.
This is the part almost nobody knows, the Radfan Mountains.
Britain launches a massive crackdown, burning villages, destroying crops, poisoning wells, according to later testimonies. This wasn't just a fight, it was scorched earth warfare.
Inside Aden, Britain ran interrogation centers, places where men were beaten, electrocuted, hung from ceilings, sexually assaulted.
These aren't rumors. These aren't exaggerations. These are documented in British court cases decades later.
By 1967, Britain is defeated. Soldiers retreat. The last governor flees. The empire collapses on live television.
And what does Britain do on the way out?
Same as always. Destroy the documents, seal the archives, and deny everything.
By the late 1960s, Britain had lost almost every colony. But the lessons of imperial control didn't disappear. They returned home.
Northern Ireland was a flashpoint, a population divided by religion, identity, and history. Protestants, Catholics, and decades of oppression created tension waiting to explode.
Civil rights marches by Catholics were met with brutal suppression. Britain treated them like insurgents, like the colonized again.
Internment without trial is declared in 1971. Hundreds of men are arrested just for being suspected of supporting resistance.
Inside the jails, conditions are harsh. Beatings, solitary confinement, psychological intimidation.
1972. A civil rights march in Derry. Peaceful protesters, unarmed.
British soldiers opened fire, and 14 people were killed. Also, many more wounded.
This is Northern Ireland, but it looks like Aden, looks like Cyprus, looks like Kenya. The same playbook, the same disregard for human life. The British government deploys intelligence operatives, informants, and undercover officers. They plant misinformation. They manipulate communities. They pit groups against each other, divide and rule. Fear becomes a weapon. Control becomes invisible. People start to distrust neighbors, family, even their own memories. Northern Ireland proves something terrifying. The methods of empire didn't disappear. They were internalized. Britain learned how to control, terrorize, and manipulate populations and brought that home.
Every atrocity abroad, every torture camp, every psychological operation, it all comes full circle. And people die. Innocent people. In their own cities.
Britain collapsed as an empire, but the damage didn't collapse with it. The borders it drew, from India and Pakistan to Israel and Palestine, to random lines slicing through Africa, created decades of conflict that still burn today. These weren't natural borders, they were political weapons, and every line became a future war waiting to happen.
Freedom didn't mean independence, because Britain made sure the money still flowed one way. Colonies were left economically crippled, resources drained, industries sabotaged, cash crop economies forced into dependency. Britain kept the wealth, and former colonies inherited the instability. Neo-colonialism wasn't subtle, it was strategic.
The most terrifying legacy is this: the empire didn't just rule abroad, it learned. Everything Britain perfected overseas, surveillance, informants, psychological warfare, militarized policing, came back to its own streets in Northern Ireland and beyond. The empire may have ended, but its playbook didn't. It simply changed address.